Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another live stream. Thank you so much for tuning in for another show. Welcome to all of our members, subscribers, and viewers from all across the world. The United States terror forces have been conducting massacres in Yemen, with yesterday's attack on Al Hudaydah killing over 80 people, 80 innocent civilians, and wounding 150. We're going to talk about this and the details about the United States attacks, including a new aircraft carrier arriving in the region and the quick response that came from Ansarullah against this strike group, Carl Vinson, and the resistance activities inside of the Gaza Strip. More from the Golani Brigade now refusing Benjamin Netanyahu's war and talking against it, with more and more people signing petitions inside of Israel. And we're also going to talk about warnings coming from major generals in Israel about turning the country into a full-blown dictatorship and canceling the elections altogether. But we're going to start off with this report here. The United States, they had an attack. They had a very large-scale attack in the Ras Isa port, and they killed over 80 people and 150 wounded. The United States knew deliberately what they were targeting, and they knew very well that this area, you're talking about the majority of the people who are there, they are workers, they are civilians. Likewise, with the attacks that they conducted in other parts in Yemen that are heavily populated areas, killing innocent civilians, again, not being productive with their attacks against the Yemeni people, because the attacks are still ongoing. Nothing has stopped. So the United States is showing very big similarities to Israel in its genocidal intent and its attacks for show. Attacking for show, to cause lots of fire and damage and appear like they are doing something much bigger than what it is. And on the ground, you're talking about the slaughter of innocent civilians. How is that effective against Yemen? Apart from the argument from the beginning, by the way, the shameful position of the United States conducting this state-sponsored terrorism against Yemen, for standing up against a genocidal entity and imposing an embargo on a country committing war crimes and a genocide inside of the Gaza Strip. The United States is attacking Yemen because of its position against Israel and its war crimes. Yemen constantly repeats that their attacks in the Red Sea and in the areas surrounding them are primarily intended to force Israel to stop its genocide inside of the Gaza Strip and lift the siege of the Gazan population. People in Gaza haven't been getting any aid since the beginning of March. Children are dying of hunger. Israel is committing massacres against families, against women, children, innocent men every single day, and they are admitting that they're using this as leverage to apply pressure on Hamas to submit to their will and raise the white flag. Despite the fact that Hamas and the Palestinian resistance, well, primarily Hamas, they refused recently a $2 billion offer for 300 of their operatives inside of the Gaza Strip to leave, reportedly protected, and not continue. They refused that, and they are still continuing the attacks on Israel, and we will get to those attacks in a moment. However, how did Yemen respond to these attacks against them? And is this applying pressure on the Yemeni people, in particular Ansarullah, who are giving the United States this headache? Well, the United States gave itself the headache, really, by going there to participate for the sake of Israel, burning US taxpayers' money for the sake of a genocidal entity against the innocent Yemeni people, and Ansarullah, who are conducting a totally legit operation to stop a murderous country that is killing children inside of the Gaza Strip. Well, it's not that they only continued, they escalated their attacks. So before we get into this escalation, the United States, they introduced a new aircraft carrier in the Red Sea, in the region. USS Carl Vinson in the Middle East ahead of Iran-US nuclear talks. This was only 3 days ago, and I spoke about this report when the talks started coming out previously about the United States sending another strike group led by the aircraft carrier USS Carl Vinson. Why did they send the USS Carl Vinson? Isn't the USS Harry S. Truman enough? And why is the United States changing so many aircraft carriers? They're supposed to be so protected, so immune from attacks, and so advanced. What's happening? Well, clearly, the attacks of Yemen against these aircraft carriers are very productive. There were reports that there were direct attacks against all of the previous US aircraft carriers that led to them withdrawing. Now, the United States is saying that, well, USS Carl Vinson is there to only add to support the current aircraft carrier. However, it's taking the lead. It's taking the lead instead of USS Harry S. Truman. Now, the argument of the United States is, oh yeah, just the support and we're going back to maintenance. But that's only really an excuse. At the end of the day, there were significant attacks against them. The United States censors this heavily. There were some confirmed images coming out, not all of them. Some people, of course, you need to filter the information because some people also faked images on social media. But regardless of those fake reports, there were confirmed images of Ansarullah targeting aircraft carriers. And there were also reports coming from the United States about the staff of these aircraft carriers facing difficulties. Therefore, it wouldn't be surprising if USS Harry S. Truman is going back to the United States, or maybe other nearby locations that would house it or allow it to use its ports for any sort of short-term or urgent maintenance before it sails back to the United States. But clearly now, the Carl Vinson is taking the lead. Carl Vinson is taking the lead, and what's happening when Carl Vinson is taking the lead? Yemen is targeting Carl Vinson immediately. So there was a report today confirming that the armed forces of Yemen, led by Ansarullah, target Ben Gurion Airport. That's number one. The aircraft carriers Truman and Vinson. So they began with Vinson and they attacked Truman as well. And they shot down another MQ-9, the 20th MQ-9, officially now 660 million US dollars gone in the wind, in the winds of Yemen. After Yemen took down so many of them, and the United States keeps sending them. Again, it's very surprising. But they targeted Carl Vinson and they targeted Israel. There were reports that there was another area inside of Israel being targeted by Ansarullah in Yemen. Therefore, we can understand from all of this that, number one, the Yemenis are not phased. As a matter of fact, the spokesperson of Ansarullah, Yahya Sari', the spokesperson of the armed forces, Yahya Sari', was seen in this image. He said that these attacks will not deter them, but add more determination. And the people on the streets, millions, like behind him, this is a poster, but on the streets there were millions of people, again, the Palestinian flags, and showing solidarity, unbelievable levels of solidarity every single week, 1 million at least in the Yemeni streets. So this is something very important to reiterate, is that the Yemeni armed forces and Ansarullah have a mandate from the people. It's the people who are requesting them to do so, and they are acting on behalf of the people. Unlike all of the other countries across the world where you have people protesting and it's either shut down and people being imprisoned, like the land of the free and the home of the brave in other countries across the world. And in other cases, they do not represent the majority of the public, with marches in tens or hundreds of thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, or even millions of people in the streets. But instead, they take steps against these people demonstrating, trying to, well, show them as if they are, supporting something illegal or something like that, just because they're standing up against a genocide, against the biggest genocide in the 21st century, biggest infanticide, biggest massacres against reporters, children, students, scholars, healthcare staff, all of that. So the attacks of the United States are not effective, but they are still conducting these attacks. And Donald Trump is conducting these attacks when he's also talking with Iran. Now, with Iran, he was trying to show as if he is kind of trying to apply pressure on them and warn them by saying either reach a deal or we will bomb you. But yesterday, I spoke about the report that was published in the New York Times, and then it was later on published in Israel as well, that Donald Trump, no, he actually applied pressure on Benjamin Netanyahu not to attack the nuclear facilities inside of Iran. Today, there was also another report in Israel saying that the opposition leader, Yair Lapid, told Benjamin Netanyahu or urged Benjamin Netanyahu back in October to attack the Iranian oil fields so that he can paralyze the economy of Iran. And according to him, that would definitely lead to a regime collapse, as he called it. He thinks like the government in Iran is fragile. He doesn't understand that they have so much popularity in Iran, regardless of the propaganda that you hear constantly, of course, on the mainstream media. And according to him, according to Yair Lapid, in that report in Israel, he was like criticizing Benjamin Netanyahu. He was criticizing Benjamin Netanyahu because he did not attack Iran. So you have the opposition leader wanting to add more war, as if for the people who are, waiting for any signs of like hope or anything. No. And the people who are signing these petitions against the war, this is purely against what Benjamin Netanyahu is doing. But the majority, it's not like a big problem with genocide or any of Israel's atrocities inside of the Gaza Strip. There are a few who oppose that outright, and they do have voices. They're trying to censor them as much as possible in Israel. But the opposition to Benjamin Netanyahu, we're talking about people who support crimes against humanity outright and a genocide inside of the Gaza Strip, turning a blind eye to the suffering of the Palestinian people. Now, how is that affecting the developments with Yemen? How is that affecting the negotiations with Iran? Because the United States, Trump himself, he previously tied the direct attacks of Ansarullah in Yemen to Iran. And he even previously stated that Iran will be held responsible for every missile attack, every bullet shot fired by Ansarullah against the American terror forces in the region. But we spoke about yesterday or the day before about the fact that the United States said that there's going to be a meeting in another country between Iran and the United States to follow up on the talks. And that was something a little bit suspicious, because Oman, the country that was hosting these meetings and that hosted a lot of meetings to try and mediate between different countries, Oman played a very important role when China had this mediation between Saudi Arabia and Iran, and also other global conflicts too. So why did the United States now declare that they want another country? And now today we have a clarification why the United States chose another country. It's not without a reason. So Oman, apparently, they shut their ports to the United States warships. They told them no refueling and no replenishment. You can't be here. You can't refuel here. You're not welcome here. And that's a country that has normal ties with the United States. And like I said, they facilitated a lot of mediation talks and reconciliations between the United States and other countries too. Now they're telling them, no, you're not refueling here, no replenishment, nothing whatsoever. You're not welcome. And the United States they tried to keep this on the low. They did not say anything outright against Oman because they didn't want to look embarrassed. Donald Trump is really conscious about these situations where he's put in his place and he feels embarrassed. So the United States, they didn't even talk about any of that. But this report came out today, and that is clearly showing why the United States is asking for another country to mediate instead of Oman. And that's also showing another very important thing. A country like Oman, without a lot of significant power. I mean, Oman, talk about, by the way, a lovely country with lovely people. By the way, anyone who went to Oman, they will tell you what a beautiful country, amazing food, and the people are so nice over there. I haven't personally been there, but I've heard that from everyone who went to Oman. But at a state level, the country, it's not like they have the biggest armies or whatever. No, they're not like that. And they always try and have reconciliations and peace processes between countries, de-escalation between Iran and Saudi Arabia, make peace here and there. They do their bit, and it also reflects the nature of the country. So that's showing you that a country, not necessarily, that doesn't obtain necessarily a lot of power, can have influence and can have its say, and can actually refuse the United States demands and requests to use their ports or anything as such. And that's also an example to other things that might happen or have been happening in the background. Let's not forget, like some of the Gulf states who have been criticized for their positions, they also refuse to allow the United States to conduct an attack against Iran. Now, there is a notion that they know their vulnerabilities too, but not all of them have the same level of bases of the United States, for example. And not all of them are totally aligned with the US position, despite them, or some of them, not taking the required action at the required level in relation to Gaza. This is something very important. That's in relation to the United States, Yemen, and the talks with Iran and Oman. Now, moving on to Gaza and the Palestinian resistance. There were significant attacks from the Palestinian resistance in the past 48 hours against the genocide forces inside of the Gaza Strip, led primarily by the armed wing of Hamas, the Izz al-Din al-Qassam brigades. So today there was this report, they detonated a tunnel under a Zionist force and targeted 5 occupation military vehicles south of Khan Yunis. So there was a booby trap tunnel that they detonated, and in an area called, what was that area called? Khizan al-Najjar, south of Khan Yunis, they targeted other Israeli D9 bulldozers and other vehicles and machinery with Yasin 105 RPGs and a Shuwad explosive device that they create and manufacture, alongside another barrel bomb, added by more attacks coming from the armed wing of the PIJ, the Saray al-Quds or al-Quds brigades, who launched missiles on the genocide forces inside of Rafah. So the Palestinian resistance is now clearly popping up more. And in this report, by the way, that came up today about the Al-Qassam brigades specifically, they said after returning from the battle lines, our fighters confirmed the detonation of 3 highly explosive devices. That's in one of them, meaning that these fighters are not even being touched. They're not being seen, they're not being touched, they're returning peacefully, and no one's finding out where they are, showing you the level of, stupidity and failure of the Israeli genocide forces inside of Gaza. Again, confirming what they actually say, that they are having this operation against the people, whether when it comes to blocking every single aid to starve people to death and kill people who need medication and force people to have surgeries, and in many cases unsuccessful, without anesthesia, including children who die because of that, killing infants and fetuses even, with horror images coming on social media the social media platforms who allow such images to be published, but it's important for people to know what this genocide entity is committing inside of the Gaza Strip, no matter how graphic it is, because it's happening somewhere in the world. But they're not targeting anything to do with the resistance. That's why they are being roasted now. They're being roasted by the Palestinian resistance, who's now clearly decided that they want to take more confrontations against Israel in all parts of Gaza, whether it's in the south, in Khan Yunis, where they're trying to enter in the south, or other parts of Gaza too. And again, Israel is not showing that it has a strategy. Israel is not showing that it has a strategy against the Palestinian resistance. As a matter of fact, their confirmations are leading to more problems internally inside the state of Israel. And one of these problems now is not only with the pilots and the paratroopers and Unit 8200. No. Today you have outright, and this was reported just from approximately 3 days ago, Golani Brigade. The Golani Brigade soldiers, they signed a letter to end the war in Gaza and have immediate talks to release the captives, release the Israelis from the Gaza Strip who are held by the Palestinian resistance. And this is spreading like wildfire, and you have people inside of the Israeli army outright calling to stop the war. So 2 weeks ago, when this petition started, some in the Israeli army were criticizing and they were complaining that, well, some of the reservists are, being free at liberty to criticize, and some of those who are serving are, taking a step back, fearful from any potential repercussions. But now it's as if everything fades, as if they collapsed to this wall of fear, this historical taboo, this traditional taboo in Israel called the army from hell. And now they're criticizing it outright. They're criticizing outright without any fears of repercussion. And the leaders of the Israeli army, like the chief of staff or the head of the Air Force, for example, despite them threatening to sack some of them, and they have indeed sacked some, with some of their threat, they haven't followed through. Why? Because they have no option. They don't have anyone to replace them. It's like someone has a business and they want to fire one of their staff and they don't have an alternative, or they don't have a plan B, similar to, the UK leaving the EU without a plan B, something like that. So Israel is struggling heavily, and more criticism is coming from the people inside of the Israeli army now. But one of the most dangerous things that I came across today was actually an article about an Israeli retired major general. His name is Giora Island. Giora Island is a man who held senior figures in the Israeli security establishment. He was the head of the national security in Israel, and he was also a major general in the Israeli army. He made some strong statements today against Benjamin Netanyahu and against the state of Israel. And the most important and dangerous statements that he made is that Israel will be having no elections in the future. So there was this report in the Israeli newspaper Ma'ariv on Giora Island saying there will be no elections. The government will make sure they don't defeat him at the ballot box, defeat him in reference to Benjamin Netanyahu. Why is he saying that there will be no elections? What's going to happen? And he was asked, aren't you being like too dramatic that, Israel will have no elections? He said, no, actually. The rationale is very simple. Turning a democracy, as he's calling it, of course, a democracy, from a democracy to a dictatorship takes several steps. The man is already trying to control the army, the security establishment, sacking the head of the Shin Bet and appointing someone who will be another poodle. He is actively seeking to control the committee that appoints judges in the Israeli High Court or Supreme Court. And all of these are steps that are initially taken before more dramatic measures are taken. Therefore, Benjamin Netanyahu, as soon as he starts implementing more of these actions, he will have any excuse to control, dictate, and force the Israeli public to submit to his will. At the end of the day, according to him in that article, if you're talking about democracy, you're talking about like an oath or mutual trust between the people and the state, where the people will have certain sacrifices for the state, in many cases of taxation, or like doing things that risk their lives, like being sent to war, to protect the actual state. And the way Benjamin Netanyahu is moving on with his actions in relation to the continued genocide, despite constant criticism, the lack of reaching to an agreement, and him appointing people who will only delay any potential agreement, him opposing suggestions and advice from the security establishment on his approach towards the war or the genocide in Gaza, him sacking or forcing the previous IDF chief of staff to resign, now officially sacking Ronen Bar and facing confrontations with the Supreme Court, then opening so many fronts so that if one front de-escalates, he can have an excuse, escalate another front, throw some gasoline in, and have more excuses to get himself out of trouble when it comes to the court cases and hearings that he is facing on a weekly basis, and tell them, I need an exemption, I have an exemption, I have something urgent to do, and I cannot attend. And they will tell him, yes, sure, Prime Minister, you don't have to come today because I need to make an important decision, or I have a security meeting. So according to that rationale of Gura Island, the retired Major General, Netanyahu will easily lead Israel to a place where he will actually cancel the elections, because the elections are in October 2026. And judging by how long this has gone so far now, the fact that the man tried to delay and actually delayed ceasefire agreements going against the Israeli negotiating delegations as well, and the will of the majority of the Israeli population who want to stop the war, and doing all of these things, well, he now has a poodle in the form of Ron Dermer leading the negotiating delegation, who was heavily criticized by the families of the prisoners of war. Yesterday, we spoke about the criticism that came from the families of the prisoners of war after they met him, where they said we felt hopeless and powerless, and there was no action plan, and we were not given any deadlines whatsoever. He only spoke about 3 to 6 months with no action plan whatsoever, meaning that Benjamin Netanyahu, well, he actually has the capacity, he has the power, and he has the people to lead Israel to places it has never been before. And that would include dramatic moves such as outright canceling the elections or manipulating them to a level where they would secure Benjamin Netanyahu's position in power for the rest of his life. And these were the main things that I wanted to share with you in this live stream. I hope I shed some light and added some beneficial information for you. Thank you everyone for tuning in. I'll open the space up for community participation, see if we have any questions. If you have anything for me, if you wouldn't mind highlighting your questions so that I don't miss any of them. Let's go to Stephen Kelly, who's saying, is Iran closer to striking Israel? I think Iran is fully prepared to attack Israel, and I think they are strategically capable of hurting Israel very badly, but I do not think that they will necessarily choose the time now to strike Israel, especially as they are in the middle of talks with the United States to do with their nuclear program. Now, so long as there is a prospect to reach a deal, and judging by the actual statements that are coming from both sides, there is a prospect. It's not that there isn't a prospect. They wouldn't want to make any move to hinder that prospect. So Iran, of course, they did attack Israel twice before, but they attacked Israel at the time that was most suitable for them, and when there were no ceasefires. There was no hope in the horizon even. And they carried out those attacks, and they were significant. Now, if the talks collapse with the United States, and they might, there is a prospect that that can happen, because, well, the Donald Trump administration is very vulnerable. I mean, is the United States sovereign as a country? There's a big debate on how sovereign the United States is, with a lobby spreading like cancer all across the administration inside of the United States. And we have seen that being translated with the Trump administration sacking people, removing people who wanted to have a different approach, who were even ever so slightly critical of genocidal Israel and its conduct and its massacres and its genocide. So there is a prospect that he will be under pressure from the lobby to, that's it. No, don't have a deal with Iran and let us attack them. Now, yesterday again, we spoke about a report that he prevented Benjamin Netanyahu from carrying out a strike against the nuclear facilities in Iran. But they sent them, one of the biggest deliveries came today to Israel, by the way, in case you don't know, 9 planes full of bombs ready to be landed on children in Gaza and in other parts too. So there's a lot of leverage, clearly, that the Israeli lobby is having inside of the United States administration. And Ibn Ghaz is asking, Emirates are pushing to a ground invasion in Yemen through their proxies in the east. Did you check those claims, and do you have any information? Yes, I heard those claims, and the Emirates outright denied. The UAE, despite the fact that there were reports of previous participation or support of certain armed groups who might be Yemeni, some of them, who opposed Ansarullah previously, when there was a full-scale war with Saudi Arabia as well included, they actually denied this time. They said, no, we have no participation. All of these claims are false. This could have been an attempt to try and apply pressure on Ansarullah in Yemen, because there is an alternative administration there. You know, the administration in Yemen who is aligned with the United States and closer to the United States. They don't like Ansarullah, and they get supported by other countries. However, they're not in a really good position now. And if they want to talk about a ground invasion or a potential ground operation, who are they going to fight against? I mean, it's a helpless situation. And there is no hope. There's no prospect of hope to do anything against Ansarullah in Yemen. These people, as vicious as they are, strong as they are in the sea, they're even stronger and more persistent on the ground. And they have shown us preparations and drills, not against any proxies, but against Israel. The Yemeni armed forces, they had at least 4 to 5 drills in the past 17 months, showcasing their capabilities against Israeli settlements and bases inside of Israel. That means they're planning for something that might happen in the future. So they denied. And again, you know, this could be just one of those reports that, you know, try and instill fear in the Yemenis or doubt that, you know, something is coming apart from our airstrikes. And why is that? Because the airstrikes are not really that effective. They're just effective against innocent civilians. And Juino saying, what's the talk about Hezbollah disarming and integrating into the Lebanese army? Well, today the Secretary General of Hezbollah, Naim Qassem, he spoke, and he was very honest with his talk about the arms of the resistance. That is not going to happen. But before any talks, like, he didn't shut everything down. He said, force Israel to withdraw, to comply, and then if we want to talk internally, we'll talk. Meaning, well, Hezbollah as a movement, they won't be giving up any weapons very quickly. However, if at any point in the future there is a situation where they feel comfortable with the state being in a strategically good position, and they can integrate into the army whilst keeping a level of independence to do with their security, with their secrecy, so that they can have effectiveness against Israel. That's something that might happen, because let's be frank, Hezbollah led the liberation of Lebanon. I mean, without Hezbollah, there's no South Lebanon. They liberated all of the south of Lebanon. These people rose and became a movement to confront the Israeli occupation of Lebanon from 1982 moving forward. So you're not talking about some people who are like, these are the national people of the land. They are the sons of Lebanon who liberated their lands, and they're not going to just give in their weapons that quickly just because some people don't like them in Lebanon. It isn't going to happen. And by the way, we're very far from a point where they can be like integrated. And before that, again, you need to be talking about, well, the big problem. And that big problem is Israel and its occupation of 5 points now in South Lebanon, constantly breaching, constantly killing people in Lebanon. Today, they also declared that they killed another operative of Hezbollah in Lebanon. Yet Hezbollah are still in the same position of, well, we're going to respect the ceasefire. We're still giving time to the government, and not actually taking action against Israel yet. How long will this situation last? I mean, that's the big question, because it can't last forever. Israel being in Lebanon is something very problematic, because, like I said, Hezbollah and other resistance movements, they were established on the basis of expelling Israel from Lebanon. So now they're controlling 5 strategic hills. Okay, a couple of 100 meters into Lebanon, but that's still Lebanese territory, overlooking some of the Zionist settlements, and according to Israel, to protect them and what have you. That's not something that, they're gonna be happy with for a very long time. And again, that could be related to the negotiations that are happening between Iran and the United States, because we can't disconnect anything here. There's clearly, everything is connected. Yemen is connected with Gaza. Gaza is connected with Lebanon. Lebanon is connected with Iran. Saudi Arabia is also involved too. So it's not like you're talking about things that are totally separate. And seeing as Iran is a very big player, if they see a prospect of having a deal with the United States that would include halting, at least temporarily, any attacks on Israel for the meantime, for the time being, then that could be the case. However, this isn't something that the Lebanese will be taking for a very long time. And by the way, it wouldn't be very difficult to expel Israel from Lebanon. Israel's also doing this as part of the show, like what they're doing in Syria and in the West Bank. They're doing it for a show too. Why? Because in Lebanon, yes, they are in 5 points in South Lebanon, very close to the borders. They are exposed. I mean, they are fully exposed, as in any small action against them, they will take all of them down. And Hezbollah, up until the last moment, and before the ceasefire took place, they had the biggest attacks on Israel, the biggest, 500 projectiles reaching the central part of Israel, covering all of the north and reaching the central part of Israel, meaning that they have capabilities. And despite the fact that they received significant blows in the form of the killing of so many in the first chain of command of Hezbollah, some of them who have been there since the beginning, really, that did not affect their capabilities on the ground. And that is yet another failure for Israel. Yes, they did kill significant figures. Yes, they caused destruction. But no, they did not manage to stop the actual attacks or like they said, well, we destroyed 70% of their capabilities. Now that's not something that we have seen. And Hasibul is saying, Salam Mahmoud, do you think that there will be a ceasefire in Gaza? Look, I think there is a prospect that something might happen. It's going to be very, very fragile. It is not going to be something very solid. And so long as Benjamin Netanyahu is still there, and so long as there is a fully compliant, complicit, and genocidal administration inside of the United States, Benjamin Netanyahu can clearly get away with murder because they are still funding him, they are still arming him, they are still giving him lethal weapons of mass destruction, weapons of huge destruction, weapons to be used against innocent civilians in a genocide, in war crimes. So, state-sponsored terrorism, that's what it's called. State-sponsored terrorism, mass terror against innocent civilians. The United States is arming a war criminal, a wanted war criminal for the ICC. The United States is arming a genocidal entity confirmed to have committed genocidal acts and still is, and is outright declaring that they are conducting actions against the civilian population by banning them from aid and killing them in their sleep in tents, children, butchering them, burning them alive, to apply pressure and achieve political results with complicity and with support from the United States. That's a very big problem. And even without Benjamin Netanyahu, by the way, and let's say for argument's sake there was a ceasefire, there would still be a problem because we haven't even touched the core root cause of problem and evil in the region in the form of the West's final colony in the whole world called Israel, planting it there against the indigenous people, imposing their will against the indigenous people, ethnic cleansing, genocide, barbarism, worse crimes against humanity. They are still supporting them. And if we're not talking about that core element and removing that root cause of the problem, then there's still going to be problems even if there is a ceasefire. Now, Benjamin Netanyahu makes it much more difficult because he isn't even interested in any of that. The only thing that he's interested in is remaining in power and buying time. He's not interested in victory. He's not interested in security. He's not interested in the prosperity or safety of his people. He is interested in remaining in power for as long as possible. A psychopathic lunatic, a maniac, leading an already psychopathic country, by the way, but he's translating that in the clearest ways possible. So he went into a ceasefire. We saw what happened. That ceasefire wasn't very long. There are talks. The United States might at one point decide, you know what, that's it. No, you're going to have to. Is that going to happen? Is it not going to happen? It's not looking very hopeful, but there are talks. It happened before, and it can't go on forever. I'll tell you what, it can't go on forever. Even the United States, they can't give Israel an indefinite time to do that. Israel's already collapsing from within. Total destruction and division inside. Half of the army isn't complying. Over 100,000 outright refusing to serve. The majority refusing to serve. Now signing petitions against the government and against the war. Until when? It's not going to be lasting forever. However, Netanyahu wants to portray this as, you know, something that will be lasting forever. As if, you know, I will be implementing my plan and securing Israel for the future. Trying to flex muscles with his small little poodles, his defense minister and foreign minister, head of the delegation, embarking 24/7, trying to show some strength when they are annihilated from within, annihilated, crushed. They're about to completely wipe themselves off internally. And that's something, by the way, that people need to consider very heavily. And the fact that they are conducting all of these actions to cover up the internal problems That doesn't mean, that doesn't change reality. In Gullyburg, Mahmoud isn't likely for Netanyahu to flee the country if he orders strike on Iran. Yeah, he could flee the country. I mean, he would surely want to keep himself safe. You remember when I was live streaming the attack of Iran in October, do you remember his press conference? His hands were like this. He was shaking. He was petrified. He was in a bunker like a rat, alongside his other genocidal companions. They were hiding like rats, the child killers, in bunkers, petrified from the Iranian missiles. They were landing. They were landing and they were causing a lot of problems. So he will definitely be trying to protect himself, either in a bunker or snap visit to the United States. I'm sure he already has plans, by the way, to be protected, and the destination will most likely be the United States. By the way, he spent a lot of time there, and the United States already houses some of the biggest mass murders of the 21st century or the 20th century, people who are honored and walk and talk and, you know, red carpets and what have you. So they don't mind bringing another person who killed 50, 60,000 people. What is that to them? That's like peanuts in comparison to what some United States leaders did before. So he will be looking to protect himself. And Alan Marwin, thank you very much, said, I agree. Yes, it absolutely can't go on forever. Let's see if we have anything else. Okay. Freedom Fighters is saying Larry Wilkerson says he thinks somewhere between 30 to 45 days Bibi might be kicked out or assassinated. Well, look, I mean, if you want to establish a real, genuine idea as to where Netanyahu is actually going, look at how things have been going on for him for the past 17 months. And is his situation getting better or worse? His situation is not getting better. His situation is only getting worse. More and more people speaking against him. Yes, it hasn't led to him being taken down. It hasn't led to a hot civil war, which means people taking arms against each other. But what it has led is to the stripping off of the legitimacy of not only just Benjamin Netanyahu, but Israel as a state. It led to some of the most prominent figures in the Israeli security establishment and political echelon as well, saying that they're doomed and that they're on their way to oblivion. It's led to people having a normal debate about post-Zionism and how Zionism failed and how it was all a facade. It led to revealing Israel for what it is. And that is the biggest threat, not only to Netanyahu, but to the state of Israel, as it has existed since its inception, as an apartheid ethnocracy and supremacy based on ethnic cleansing and mass murder. That's the real deal. And guess what? Benjamin Netanyahu led Israel to this position, and he's only making it worse. The other day I saw this poll online saying if you chose America to attack a country, who would it be? Iran, China, Russia, or Israel? 87% of people who are mostly American said Israel. So the majority of Americans want their state to attack Israel, not arm Israel. So do you understand? And this is where things are changing. And this is coming alongside a global change. This is coming alongside the collapse of the empire, of unilateralism, of unipolarity that is ending. And that's not going to be something that, you know, all of a sudden happens in a, you know, a blink of an eye. It will take some time, and you might see more destruction, unfortunately. because empires don't usually go without showing their ugliest side. And that's what we're seeing now, Israel's ugliest side. As it happened when it started, as it happened when it established itself as a state, if not even worse, with the numbers of killed and levels of brutality, criminality, and barbarism used, and the level of complicity too. But there is absolutely a threat against Benjamin Netanyahu. Look, firstly, not only Hezbollah tried to assassinate him and landed a drone on his window in Caesarea, an Israeli threw a fire bomb, light bomb on his house. How many networks of Israelis operating for Iran have been revealed in Israel in the past year? Many, including people from varying ages and backgrounds, by the way. Backgrounds European, non-European, and what have you, young, old, operating for Iran, Israel's arch enemy, who calls for the destruction of Israel. That's showing you that something is changing there. If people in big numbers are operating for Israel's biggest enemy, that's showing you that they are putting more trust in what is labeled as Israel's arch enemy than they do in their own leaders. And Benjamin Netanyahu indeed led Israel to that. And people despise him. Because listen, if you see the streets in Israel, people will say, if whenever anyone dies, they will tell you, why wasn't Netanyahu? Why didn't Netanyahu die in a car crash? When Hezbollah tried to assassinate him in a drone to his house, people in Israel were saying, I wish they were successful. To that level. So there are people who want him dead in Israel. And it's only a matter of time of if that person who wants him dead actually has the capacity to do so, and he takes action in Israel. Because that's something that is very possible. And there are people, well, who have power, who want Benjamin Netanyahu down. And Melissa, thank you so much for that as well. Much appreciated. Let's go to your next participation. And Glenn Huxley as well. And Freedom Fighters, thank you so much. Okay. Yeah, that's it. Okay, we'll wrap it up there, guys. Cool. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in for another live stream. Thank you, everyone who participated too. I'm sorry if I missed some of the participation. Thanks for everyone who sent supers, Alan, Marwin, Melissa, Glenn, and Freedom Fighters as well. In the meantime, everyone, stay blessed. Take care. I'll have a couple of videos for you, hopefully tonight and tomorrow. And I will see you soon in the next video. Peace, everyone. Salam.